The year is 1980. A 16-year-old kid walks through the doors of a small McDonald's in Albuquerque, New Mexico. It's his first day, his first job. He's not thinking about the future. He's not thinking about becoming a billionaire. He's thinking about his paycheck, $2.69 per hour. That's it. Just a teenager trying to earn some money, learn some responsibility, maybe save up for something he wants. His name is Jeff Bezos. 38 years later, that same man will be worth over $180 billion. He'll be the richest person on planet Earth. He'll own the largest online marketplace in human history. He'll own a newspaper. He'll run a space company. He'll have changed the way billions of people shop, communicate, and live their daily lives. But on that first day at McDonald's, he was nobody, just another kid in a uniform, cleaning grills and taking orders. This is the extraordinary story of how a minimum wage worker built the most valuable company in history. But it's not just a story about money or success. It's a story about mentality. It's a story about choices. It's a story about what happens when intelligence meets opportunity, when ambition meets timing, and when a person decides that surrender is not an option. Let's go back to the beginning. January 12, 1964, Albuquerque, New Mexico. A baby boy is born to a 17-year-old girl named Jacqueline Geese. She hasn't even graduated high school yet. She's not married. She's terrified. Years later, she would recall, "I was 2 weeks past my 17th birthday and a junior in high school when I gave birth to my first son, Jeff." The baby's father is Ted Jorgensen. He doesn't stick around. Jacqueline is left alone with an infant, no partner, no safety net, and barely any resources. The family is desperately poor. So poor that she couldn't afford basic things most people take for granted. Listen to how poor they actually were. Jacqueline couldn't afford a telephone. To you and me, a phone seems like a basic necessity. It's something you have. But to her, it was a luxury beyond her reach. She later said, "I figured out that Jeff and I could move into our own apartment if we just didn't have a phone. So we didn't have one."
That's the kind of poverty we're talking about. She had to choose between a roof over their heads and a phone line. She chose the roof. But something interesting happens when you grow up in that kind of environment. You develop something that can't be taught in school. You develop resilience. You develop the understanding that if you want something, you have to figure out how to get it yourself. There's no safety net. There's no one coming to save you. It's just you and your determination. Young Jeff would absorb this lesson early, even if he didn't realize it. When Jeff was 4 years old, his mother remarried. Her new husband was Miguel Bezos, a Cuban immigrant who had come to America seeking a better life. Miguel had studied engineering at the University of Albuquerque. He was educated, hardworking, and stable. He brought something to the family that Jeff's biological father never could: presence, commitment, a steady hand. Miguel legally adopted Jeff, and the boy's last name changed from Jorgensen to Bezos. More than just a name changed, though. Miguel became the father figure that would shape Jeff's character for the rest of his life. After Miguel joined the family, things stabilized. Miguel got a job as an engineer for Exxon, and the family moved to Houston, Texas. For the first time, Jeff had something he'd never had before: security, food on the table, a real home, a father who cared about him. But here's where the story gets really interesting. Every single summer, from the time Jeff was 4 years old until he turned 16, his grandfather would call. Jeff's mother would pack his bags, and Jeff would spend 3 months on his grandfather's ranch in Cotulla, Texas. 3 months,
every single year for 12 straight years. This wasn't a vacation where you sit around and relax. This was an education. His grandfather owned a substantial ranch, 25,000 acres actually, and he ran it the old-fashioned way. Everything he needed he either had or he figured out how to get it. He was the definition of self-reliance. Jeff would later reflect on those summers with profound gratitude. He was incredibly self-reliant. He did everything himself. If one of the animals got sick, he figured out what to do himself. Think about what that means. Young Jeff didn't see his grandfather call a veterinarian or a repairman or an expert. He saw his grandfather identify a problem, think through potential solutions, and solve it himself. He saw a man who didn't make excuses. He didn't wait for someone else to fix things. He didn't feel sorry for himself if he lacked knowledge in a particular area. He simply figured it out. This became the template for how Jeff Bezos would approach his entire life and career. Years later, when people asked him how he became so successful, he would explain his approach to taking on massive projects he didn't understand. He would take on major projects that he didn't really know how to do, and then figure out how to do it. That's his grandfather's lesson. That's the mentality he inherited every summer on that Texas ranch. Those 12 summers were transformational in ways that couldn't be measured in grades or achievements. They taught Jeff something far more valuable than any school could. They taught him that limits are often just self-imposed. If you don't know how to do something, you don't wait around for permission or instruction. You figure it out. This mentality would become the foundation of Amazon. It would be why, when the company faced seemingly insurmountable obstacles, Jeff refused to give up. It would be why he could see opportunities in technologies that hadn't been invented yet. It would be why he could build businesses in industries he had no prior experience in. The grandfather's ranch taught him something else, too. It taught him to think long-term. On a working ranch, you can't think in terms of weeks or months. You have to think in terms of seasons and years. You have to plan ahead. You have to be patient. You have to understand that real growth takes time. This would also become central to Amazon's philosophy. While other companies obsessed over quarterly earnings, Amazon thought in terms of decades. While Wall Street demanded immediate profits, Jeff reinvested everything back into the company. That long-term thinking, that came from those summers on the ranch. Back in Houston, Jeff's intellectual abilities became apparent almost immediately. He wasn't just smart, he was remarkably smart. So smart that his elementary school identified him for a gifted program. While other kids were in regular classes, Jeff was placed in accelerated coursework designed for exceptional students. And Jeff took advantage of it. He didn't just coast, he threw himself into learning with an intensity that suggested he understood something important. Intelligence is a tool, and tools only have value if you use them. Around age 12, Jeff transformed the family garage into what he called Science Fair Central. This wasn't some casual hobby project. He was building things, creating inventions. He built an alarm system designed to keep his younger siblings out of his room, an interesting early example of his later obsession with systems and efficiency. The point isn't that he built an alarm system. The point is the mindset. He saw a problem, his siblings invading his space, and instead of just complaining about it, he engineered a solution. This was his nature. Identify problem, solve problem, move on. By the time Jeff reached high school, his reputation as an exceptional student was firmly established. He wasn't just getting good grades, he was excelling at everything. In 1982, he received the Silver Knight Award for outstanding leadership and community service. When he graduated from Miami Palmetto Senior High School, he graduated as valedictorian. But here's what's really important. Despite his intellectual gifts, despite his family's improved circumstances, Jeff remained grounded. He worked. He understood that intelligence alone wasn't enough. You had to put in the effort. You had to do the work. And crucially, he hadn't become arrogant. He hadn't developed the attitude that the world owed him anything. He was smart, yes, but he also understood that smarts without work ethic is just potential that never gets realized. That's why when he was 16 and needed money, he took a job at McDonald's. Most gifted kids might have looked down on that kind of work. Not Jeff. He understood that every experience teaches you something. Working at McDonald's taught him about efficiency, about systems, about customer service, about the importance of doing things right even when it's menial work. Those lessons would show up in Amazon's culture decades later. When it came time for college, Jeff had options, lots of them. Top universities wanted him. His test scores were exceptional. His grades were perfect. His work ethic was undeniable. He chose Princeton University, but his reasons were specific. He didn't go to Princeton for the prestige or the name. He went because he wanted to study physics. He loved physics. He saw it as the most fundamental science, the key to understanding how the universe worked. He recalls, "I went to Princeton primarily because I wanted to study physics, which is such a fantastic place to study physics." But something interesting happened once he got to Princeton. He was surrounded by physicists and physics majors. He was in classes with people who were equally talented, equally passionate, equally committed. And he realized something. Physics wasn't for him. Not because he wasn't smart enough, not because he couldn't do it, but because his interest didn't run as deep as he'd thought. So he switched majors. He moved toward electrical engineering and computer science. This wasn't a downgrade. It was a strategic decision. He was being honest with himself about where his true interests lay. And that honesty, that willingness to course correct when you realize you're heading the wrong direction, is another crucial element of his character. At Princeton, Jeff excelled. He graduated summa cum laude, which means he was among the highest achievers in his entire class. He was the kind of student that major companies recruit directly from campus. Intel wanted him, Nokia wanted him, Accenture wanted him. These were the elite tech companies of the 1980s. But Jeff made an interesting choice. Instead of going to one of the well-known giants, he took a job at a startup called Fetel. It was a financial technology company, not glamorous, not famous, but it was doing something interesting, and for Jeff, that mattered more than the prestigious name on the business card.
After a couple of years at Fetel, he moved to another financial company, a quantitative hedge fund called D.E. Shaw & Co., located in New York City. This is where things get really interesting. D.E. Shaw was run by a brilliant man named David Shaw. And when I say brilliant, I mean genuinely brilliant. The kind of person who sees patterns in markets that others miss. The kind of person who understands complex systems at a deep level. Jeff recalls the experience. "I went to New York City and ended up working at a quantitative hedge fund run by a brilliant man named David Shaw." What's crucial here is not the money Jeff made, and he was making good money, enough to live in Manhattan in the late 1980s. What's crucial is what he learned. David Shaw taught him about hiring. He taught him about building teams. He taught him about organizational culture. He taught him that the people you surround yourself with matter more than almost anything else. These lessons would become foundational to how Jeff would eventually build Amazon. He understood, viscerally, that great companies are built by great people, and that your job as a leader is to recruit, develop, and inspire those people. By his early 30s, Jeff had become the youngest senior vice president at D.E. Shaw. He was on a trajectory. Success was coming. He had achieved the things that society said he should achieve: a prestigious job, a high salary, respect from his peers, the kind of position that most people would never dream of reaching. On paper, Jeff Bezos had made it. But on the personal front, something was missing. Despite his professional success, Jeff wanted something that his work couldn't provide. He wanted a partner. He wanted a wife. He wanted to build a life with someone. So he did what Jeff Bezos does when he wants something. He approached it systematically. He told his friends his criteria for a potential partner, and one of the criteria he mentioned would later become famous. He said, "I want a woman who could get me out of a third-world prison."
That sounds strange at first, but think about what he actually means. He doesn't mean he's planning to commit crimes. He means he wants someone resourceful, someone intelligent, someone capable, someone who won't crumble under pressure. He said, "I think you don't want to go through life with teammates who aren't resourceful." That word, teammates, is revealing. He's not looking for a dependent. He's not looking for someone to complete him or make his life whole. He's looking for an equal, a partner, someone who can stand beside him and tackle whatever comes. In 1992, through a mutual friend, Jeff met Mackenzie Tuttle. Mackenzie was working at D.E. Shaw as a research associate. She was intelligent, ambitious, capable. She understood the world Jeff moved in. She understood his ambitions. What happened next was characteristically Jeff. He didn't date her casually for 2 years while he figured out if she was right. He moved quickly. They dated for 3 months. Then they got engaged. Then, in 1993, they got married. Mackenzie recalls, "Our whole dating engagement period was only 6 months long." That speed might seem reckless to some people, but it wasn't reckless for Jeff. It was decisive. He'd evaluated the situation. He'd made a decision. He was moving forward. This quality, the ability to move quickly once he decided on a direction, would become one of his superpowers. By 1994, Jeff Bezos had achieved the American dream. He was making excellent money at D.E. Shaw. He had just gotten married to a brilliant woman. He and Mackenzie had a nice apartment in Manhattan. He had the kind of job that most people would consider the pinnacle of success. But success made him restless. In interviews, he would later explain his mindset using something he called the regret minimization framework. Here's how it works. Imagine yourself at 80 years old. You're sitting in a quiet moment of reflection, looking back on your entire life. What will you regret? He explains it this way. When I'm 80 years old, I want to have minimized the number of regrets that I have. I don't want to be 80 years old in a quiet moment of reflection, thinking back over my life and cataloging a bunch of major regrets. Think about that for a second. Most people go through life reacting to circumstances. They take the job that's offered. They follow the path that's laid out. They don't stop to ask themselves, is this going to be something I'm proud of when I'm old? Jeff was asking that question, and the answer was making him uncomfortable. In 1994, he discovered something that changed his perspective. He came across a statistic that would alter the course of his life. Web usage was growing at 2,300% annually, not 23%, not 230%, 2,300%. That's not a trend, that's a revolution. That's a fundamental change in how human civilization works. Jeff saw that statistic and something clicked. He understood something that most people didn't. The internet was going to be bigger than anyone realized. And more importantly, the internet was going to fundamentally change commerce. He started thinking about what you could sell online. What categories of products made sense to sell through the internet? He thought about it systematically. What category had the most selection? Where could the internet's inherent advantage, unlimited inventory, be most powerful? The answer: books. There were approximately 3 million different books in print in 1994. 3 million! No physical bookstore in the world could stock even a fraction of that. But online, you could offer every book ever published, universal selection. That was the competitive advantage. So Jeff went to his boss, David Shaw, and told him he wanted to start a company selling books on the internet. David Shaw didn't laugh. He didn't dismiss the idea. He did something more valuable. He took Jeff for a long walk through Central Park. And as they walked, David Shaw listened carefully to what Jeff was proposing. At the end of the walk, David Shaw said something that would stay with Jeff forever. You can have a job, you can have a career, or you can have a calling. And if you can somehow figure out how to have a calling, you have hit the jackpot, because that's the big deal. Then David Shaw said something else. That sounds like a really good idea, but it would be an even better idea for someone who didn't already have a good job. In other words, if this is your calling, you have to be fully committed. You can't hedge your bets. You can't keep your job as a safety net. You have to jump.
That was Jeff's permission and his challenge. Making the decision to leave a six-figure job at a prestigious hedge fund to start an internet company was not a casual choice. This was his income. This was his security. This was the path that everyone had told him was the path to success. But he applied his regret minimization framework. At 80 years old, would he regret trying and failing, or would he regret never trying at all? He realized something important. I didn't think I'd regret trying and failing, and I suspected I would always be haunted by a decision to not try at all. So he decided. He quit. Mackenzie was fully supportive. She didn't hesitate. She didn't try to talk him out of it. She understood what he was trying to do. She believed in the vision. Together, they packed up their lives in New York and drove cross-country to Seattle. Why Seattle? Because there was a large population of software developers there. Because the cost of living was lower than New York. Because it felt like a place where something new could happen. During that cross-country drive, Jeff did something characteristic. He wrote Amazon's business plan. Not after he arrived, not after he had time to think about it. During the drive, he was already working. He was already building. The name itself, Amazon, was carefully chosen. He wanted a name that started with A, so it would appear first in alphabetical listings. He wanted something that conveyed scale and size. The Amazon is the largest river in the world. That's what he wanted to evoke. When they arrived in Seattle, Jeff and Mackenzie found a garage. A real garage, not a metaphorical garage office, an actual garage. This is where Amazon would begin. Jeff's parents, understanding the potential, invested their life savings, approximately $300,000, into the venture. Think about that. His parents believed in him enough to bet everything they had.
That's not just financial support, that's a level of faith that carries weight. But Jeff was careful to be honest. He told every early investor the same thing. There is a 70% chance you're going to lose all of this. He explained his thinking. I thought I was giving myself triple the normal odds. Usually it's about 10%. Here I was giving myself a 30% chance of success. That's a fascinating detail because it reveals his mindset. He wasn't overconfident. He wasn't delusional about his chances. He understood that this was a long shot. He understood that he might fail. But he also understood that the potential was enormous. So he was being honest about the risks while still believing in the vision. The early days were rough. Mackenzie handled the accounting despite having no prior experience with bookkeeping. Jeff personally drove packages to the post office. They packed books on the floor because they didn't have tables. There was no office furniture. There was no professional infrastructure. There was just two people working their asses off in a garage. Mackenzie would later reflect on those early days. We were so inefficient with our operations and logistics in those early days. But efficiency would come. That's what entrepreneurs do. They start messy and chaotic. Then they systematize. Then they scale. Something magical happened in the first 30 days. Jeff and Mackenzie had set up their website. They had a system for taking orders. They had a way to pack and ship books. Then they launched. Within 30 days, they had received orders from all 50 states and 45 different countries. Let me repeat that. All 50 states and 45 countries in the first month. They were shocked. Mackenzie recalls, "We were shocked at the customer response. Literally, in the first 30 days, we had orders from all 50 states and 45 different countries." This wasn't a slow ramp-up. This wasn't a gradual growth curve. This was explosive, immediate validation that the concept worked. The Internet had no borders. People wanted books delivered to their homes, and Amazon was the only company set up to deliver them. The timing was perfect, too. Between 1995 and 1997, computer ownership in American households doubled from 15% to 35%. More people were online. More people had internet access. More people were comfortable buying things online. The market was growing, and Amazon was perfectly positioned to capture that growth. But here's what separated Amazon from every other online retailer that would emerge during this period. Jeff had an obsession, and it wasn't the obsession most companies have. Most companies obsess over their competitors. They study what their competitors are doing. They try to beat their competitors at their own game. They're reactive. They're defensive. Jeff Bezos obsessed over customers. He explains it this way. The number one thing that has made us successful by far is obsessive-compulsive focus on the customer as opposed to obsession over the competitor. He didn't obsess over other online bookstores. He obsessed over what customers wanted. He'd email customers and ask them directly, "What else would you like us to sell?" And he listened to the answers. When customers said they wanted windshield wiper blades, Jeff realized something important. We can sell anything this way. He wasn't thinking small. He wasn't thinking about becoming the best online bookstore. He was thinking about becoming the everything store, the one place where you could buy anything you wanted delivered to your door. That's a fundamentally different mindset. That's not competitive thinking. That's visionary thinking. In 1997, Amazon went public. The IPO was at $1.73 per share. That seems quaint now, but at the time, it was a significant moment. The company that had started in a garage just 3 years earlier was now a public company. But here's what makes this interesting. That share price of $1.73 would eventually climb to over $3,000 per share, adjusted for splits. The investors who bought at the IPO made extraordinary returns. The IPO raised $54 million in capital. It gave Amazon the resources to scale. It gave Jeff official credibility, and it made him, for the first time, a millionaire. But even then, he remained grounded. One of the early investors in Amazon would later describe Jeff's pitch in the early days. This investor, who was a successful venture capitalist, asked Jeff directly, "What makes you think you can build a billion-dollar company?" Jeff's answer was revealing. He said, "Dave, I want you to invest in my company. I'm going to start a bookstore in my garage. I'm going to put it online. People are going to buy online. I'm going to ship out of my garage. But if you invest in me, Dave, someday I'm going to be the richest man in the world. I'll do over $100 billion. This was 1994. Think about that context. In 1994, there was no such thing as a $100 billion company, not in terms of market value. The concept was almost impossible to fathom. The investor recalls his reaction. First of all, there's no such thing as a $100 billion company 25 years ago. Statistically, there's no such thing. Countries didn't have $100 billion. Our national debt wasn't even $100 billion. And this dude's telling me at 26 years old that he's going to be the richest man in the world because he has a garage and the internet? The investor continues. He was already applauding himself, going at the right way at the perfect time. I'm going to make as much as I can, as quickly as I can. And I'm sitting there going, there's no way this is going to be a big business. But it turned out Jeff's ambition was modest. He did become the richest man in the world, and Amazon's market value did exceed $100 billion, and then $500 billion, and then $1 trillion. His vision, which seemed insane at the time, turned out to be accurate. After the IPO, the focus shifted from just surviving to rapid expansion. Amazon started to expand beyond books. Jeff sent emails to customers asking what else they wanted to buy. The feedback drove decisions.
By 1998, Amazon was selling CDs and videos. By 1999, they were selling clothes. They launched A9, a commercial search engine focused on e-commerce. They launched an online sporting goods store with thousands of brands. The stock price reflected this expansion. In 1998, Amazon stock was trading around $6 per share. By the end of 1999, it had climbed to $60 per share, a tenfold increase in a single year. By 1999, just 5 years after that garage in Seattle, Jeff's net worth had reached $10.1 billion. He made Forbes' billionaires list. At 35 years old, he was officially a billionaire, multiple times over. But here's what's remarkable. Despite this enormous wealth, he remained frugal. He drove a 1986 Honda Civic. His desk was made from a door, literally a wooden door laid across some sawhorses. He explains his reasoning. It's a symbol of spending money on things that matter to customers and not spending money on things that don't. In other words, every dollar Amazon spent had to be justified by how it benefited customers. If it didn't benefit customers, Amazon didn't spend it. His personal frugality wasn't about being cheap. It was a philosophy that permeated the entire company. Then, in March 2000, everything changed. The dot-com bubble burst. It was one of the most dramatic market crashes in modern history. Companies that had been valued at billions of dollars overnight became worthless. The assumption that the internet changes everything suddenly seemed naive and foolish. Amazon's stock, which had reached $113 per share, plummeted. It crashed from $113 to $6 in less than a year, a 95% collapse.
In 6 months, most of Jeff's net worth evaporated. His $10.1 billion became $1.5 billion.
But it was worse than just the stock price. The entire company was at risk. Amazon was burning through cash. The company wasn't profitable. Wall Street was turning against the internet companies. Bankruptcy seemed possible, likely even. Amazon laid off 14% of its workforce. That's not a small number. That's significant. People who had joined the company and believed in the mission suddenly had no job. Newspapers ran headlines about Amazon's impending collapse. Analysts declared the internet to be a failure. The sentiment shifted dramatically from "the internet will change everything" to "this was all just hype." Most people would have folded. Most founders would have looked for the exit, would have tried to salvage what they could, would have accepted defeat. Jeff did not. He said something during this period that reveals his entire approach to entrepreneurship. The whole point of moving things forward is you run into problems, you run into failures, things don't work, you have to back up and try again. More importantly, he maintained something crucial: faith in the fundamental health of the business. He told his team and investors that while the stock price was going the wrong way, everything inside the company was actually getting better. He explains, as the stock price was going the wrong way, everything inside the company was going the right way. Think about that perspective. While everyone else was looking at the stock ticker and concluding the company was dying, Jeff was looking at the operational metrics: customer satisfaction, revenue growth, efficiency improvements, and those metrics were saying something different. This is the mark of a visionary. It's not blind faith, it's discernment. It's the ability to distinguish between what's actually happening in the company and what the market is saying about the company. They can diverge. And if you understand your company better than the market understands your company, you can take advantage of that divergence. Jeff understood Amazon better than the market understood Amazon. So while everyone else was panicking, he was calm. He was patient. He was thinking long-term. Amazon continued to innovate during the crisis, which is remarkable. Most companies in crisis mode shut down innovation and just focus on survival. But Amazon launched Amazon Web Services in 2002. It wasn't a consumer-facing product. It was infrastructure. It was allowing third-party retailers to build their own online stores using Amazon's technology. This was innovative thinking. Instead of just trying to dominate e-commerce directly, Amazon was building the tools that enabled others to participate in e-commerce. It was layers of the business. And importantly, it created additional revenue streams. By 2004, Amazon stock had recovered to $50 per share, a massive recovery from the $6 bottom. And from that point forward, the recovery accelerated. The company finally achieved profitability. It wasn't a fluke, it was consistent. Year after year, Amazon was profitable and growing. The market's concerns proved unfounded. By 2000, Jeff's interests had expanded beyond commerce. He founded Blue Origin, a space exploration company. He kept it secret until 2006, working on it quietly without drawing attention. Why space? Because it had captivated him since childhood. He recalls, "I watched Neil Armstrong step onto the moon when I was 5. He wanted to build the infrastructure for space travel. He wanted to make it affordable. He wanted to enable the expansion of human civilization into space. He describes the vision: millions of people living and working in space.
This wasn't some side project for Jeff. This was a calling. He was willing to invest billions of his own dollars into Blue Origin because he believed in it. He didn't care if it was profitable. He cared if it mattered. In 2013, Jeff made another unconventional purchase. He bought the Washington Post for $250 million. This was the iconic newspaper that had broken Watergate. It was a cultural institution, and it was struggling. The internet had devastated traditional newspapers. Their business model was broken. Advertising revenue had disappeared to Google and Facebook. Readership had migrated online. The Post was losing money every year. Most people would have looked at that situation and passed. Why buy a losing newspaper? It didn't make sense from a financial perspective.
But Jeff saw differently. He saw a newspaper with a proud history, outstanding journalists, and a valuable brand. He saw an opportunity to modernize it. He saw a chance to take journalistic talent and combine it with internet expertise to build something new. One story about the acquisition is revealing. Jeff called the Post's owner and asked him, "How much do you want for the Post?" The owner said, $250 million. Jeff said, "Fine." I didn't negotiate with him, and I did no due diligence. That's a remarkable detail. No due diligence. He just decided to buy it and wrote the check. This wasn't recklessness. This was decisiveness. He'd made a decision, and he was moving forward. By 2016, the Washington Post was profitable again. Jeff had successfully modernized it, restructured it as a digital-first media organization, and proven that quality journalism could work on the internet if done correctly. In 2015, something remarkable happened. Amazon reported quarterly earnings that beat expectations. The stock surged 18% in after-hours trading. When markets opened the next day, Jeff earned $7 billion in 60 minutes. In 1 hour, he made more money than most people make in a lifetime. He became the 5th richest person in the world overnight. But he didn't celebrate. He didn't change how he lived. He reinvested. He used the capital to expand Amazon further. He hired 130,000 new employees. He expanded the company's reach into new categories and new countries. In March 2018, Jeff achieved something that seemed impossible when he was writing that business plan in a car heading to Seattle. He became the richest person in the world. He surpassed Bill Gates.
He said about the milestone, "I could assure you I have never sought that title. It was fine being the 2nd wealthiest person in the world. But that title represented something. It represented that the world had recognized what he'd built. Amazon had become the most valuable company, and that value was almost entirely a reflection of what he'd created through vision, persistence, and obsessive focus on customers. His wealth peaked in 2020 at $182 billion, boosted by the pandemic-driven surge in online shopping. Though Elon Musk briefly surpassed him in 2021, Jeff's position among the world's wealthiest individuals remained secure. The journey from a struggling teenage mother in Albuquerque to a son worth $180 billion is not a normal success story. It's extraordinary. It's outlier-level success. But what makes it valuable to study is that it wasn't luck. It wasn't random. It was the result of specific choices, specific mentalities, and specific decisions made at crucial moments. Jeff Bezos' story teaches us something essential about what it takes to build something remarkable. First, your origins don't determine your destination. Jeff grew up in poverty. His mother couldn't afford a phone. His biological father abandoned the family. By every measure, he started behind. But that didn't matter because he didn't accept the narrative that his origins defined his future. Second, mentality matters more than intelligence. Jeff was smart, yes, but millions of people are smart. What separated Jeff was his mentality. His grandfather taught him self-reliance. His McDonald's job taught him to respect work. His hedge fund experience taught him about building teams. These weren't advanced concepts, they were character-building lessons that compounded over time. Third, obsessing over customers instead of competitors is a different game. Every company says they care about customers. Amazon actually did it. Jeff didn't study competitors, he studied customers. He asked them what they wanted. He listened to their feedback. He built the company around their needs, not around beating some rival. Fourth, long-term thinking beats short-term optimization. While Wall Street demanded quarterly profits, Jeff reinvested everything back into the company. While competitors tried to turn a quick profit, Amazon built infrastructure for a decade of growth. That patience, that long-term thinking, that came from his grandfather's ranch. You don't plant a tree expecting fruit next month. You plant it knowing it will take years to mature.
Fifth, the ability to move quickly once you've decided is a superpower. Jeff didn't agonize over decisions forever. He evaluated the situation. He made a decision. He moved forward. He married Mackenzie in 6 months. He quit his job after making the decision. He bought the Washington Post without due diligence. This isn't recklessness. This is decisiveness. This is the ability to commit fully once you've decided. That's Jeff Bezos. From a 16-year-old making $2.69 an hour at McDonald's to the richest person on earth. From a garage in Seattle to a global empire worth trillions. His story is proof that extraordinary success is possible, not because of luck, not because of privilege, but because of mentality, because of choices, because of the refusal to accept that your beginning determines your end. If you found this story inspiring, if these lessons resonated with you, I want to ask you to do one thing. Subscribe to this channel. Hit that subscribe button, because I'm going to keep bringing you stories like this. Stories about people who built empires. Stories about choices that changed the world. Stories that remind you that you're capable of more than you think. Subscribe now and join a community of people who believe that greatness is possible. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.